Latex casting tips. Today we're going to show how to cast poly latex false face into a plaster mold. This is a very basic slip casting technique or absorption casting method, and this is the basic protocol for any type of latex casting into a plaster mold. And the first step is you need a dry plaster mold. The best gypsum products or plaster products for latex molds are pottery plaster, hydrocal, or ultracal 30. Now you want to avoid using straight plaster of Paris that is typically found at most hobby stores. Plaster of Paris is just too soft for latex casting. And it is uber important to make sure that your plaster mold is free of any kind of release residue like Vaseline or anything clogging up the surface of the mold, and it must be completely dry in order for the absorption process to work. Now today we're going to be using a hydrocal mold that has dried out for several days after casting, so we know it's dry to the touch and there's no water left over in the mold. And that's critical because if the mold is still damp, then it won't suck the moisture out of the latex and help cure the latex. Now I'm also using a throwaway brush here to work the latex into the detail of the surface of the mold. And once I've ensured that the surface is bubble free, I'm going to pour the rest of the latex in to completely fill up the mold. And once we've done that, we're ready to wait for the dwell time. And what the dwell time is with latex or slip casting, that's the amount of time that we leave the liquid latex in the mold to cure. And what happens is the dry plaster mold starts sucking out the water out of the latex on the surface. And as that happens, the skin will start to form around the surface of the mold. Now here we're setting our timer for about a 1 hour dwell time, and you'll notice the latex starting to cure there on the edge of the mold. And basically the longer the dwell time, the thicker the skin will form on the inside of the mold. The shorter the dwell time, the thinner the skin. Now at the end of the dwell time, you're ready to dump out any remaining liquid latex. And here I'm just going to recycle that into a little plastic tub here, and that could be used for another project. Or you could pour that back into the bucket that you poured it out of. Now once the dwell stage is over, the latex that's congealed against the surface of the mold, that will need to dry. And that drying time, depending on the humidity and the temperature, could take anywhere from an hour or two to several hours, depending on how thick that skin is. This particular piece, we built up a fairly thick skin, about 1/8 of an inch. And you'll notice that when it dries and it begins to cure completely, it'll naturally start to pull away from the mold. And it'll be very easy to demold the longer you wait. In fact, if you let a part sit long enough in the mold, it will actually pull itself away from the sides of the mold as it shrinks and cures completely. And now you're ready to trim and paint your cast latex part. Now I usually just use the scissors here to clean up any flange or any seams, and we're ready to paint our finished part. Now painting latex, there's a lot of ways to go about it, but we're just going to cover a very basic, straightforward method for latex painting. Basically what you can do is take your clean latex part, and the fresher the better. You want to do this as soon as you can when you remove it from the mold. So in this case we did some quick paint work on this just within minutes after we demolded our part. But the fresher you can do it, the better the bond you're going to get between your latex paint and your latex part. Now to make latex paint, we're basically going to take more of the same material that our part is cast with, more liquid latex, and we're going to mix that with some acrylic paint. Here we're just using some cheap hobby store acrylic paint. This is just some brown acrylic paint, and we're going to squeeze a little bit of that into our latex and mix that in to get the color that we want. And obviously you can add more or less acrylic colors to adjust the intensity of the color, and you can add all kinds of different colors to get different shades that you want. But the basic idea here is you're pigmenting the latex with acrylic paint. And it's important that you use acrylic and not oil paint. Acrylics are the best paint for this, as they will disperse in the water-based latex. So it's a good match, and it doesn't affect the chemistry of the latex any. And that's the key thing here. You want to mix something into the latex to color it so that it still does its proper bond with the other latex of your part, and it will move and flex appropriately with your final flexible part. Now, it's important to remember that latex darkens as it dries, and that includes latex paint. So when you're painting, you want to compensate for that, because you'll see here in a minute, as that layer with the acrylic paint dries, it darkens a good bit. So you want to keep that in mind when you're painting, and always paint a little bit lighter than it really needs to be to compensate for that darkening effect. And there you have the basic process of absorption casting using poly latex false face. And of course, the false face latex is available on our web store at brickintheyard.com.